Hi everyone, Corey Barker here. Now in this course we're going to be taking a look at Illustrator Beyond the Basics. Now if you haven't checked out the beginner's course done by Pete Collins, I definitely would encourage you to check that out first and then jump over here and check out the Beyond the Basics, because what we're going to be doing is taking a look at a few new features in CC, but also be taking a look at some older features that have been around in Illustrator for some time but are extremely valuable when you're working in the program to get the most out of it. So let's take a look at Illustrator CC Beyond the Basics.
All right, so we're going to start by first taking a look at something that isn't necessarily a new feature in Illustrator CC, but rather a tremendous enhancement to the brush engine that is already in the program, in that it allows you to turn an image, raster image, into a brush. Now, prior to this version, you were not able to do this. You could only take graphics like vector art and convert it into a brush and then utilize the brush, the custom brushes that way. But now we have the ability to create a number of different types of brushes using any image that you import right from Photoshop or whatever imaging program you might be using. So let's go ahead and just take a look at a couple of examples utilizing this feature. I first have an image that is merely a group of chains. Now I'm opening up this in Photoshop first because I need to extract it and do a couple of things before I bring it over into Illustrator. Now, notice I've got three different chains here, and when I'm looking for stock images, and I've said this before, I always like to look for those sets. If it's just one image, you actually are only charged one image, but yet you'll notice you'll find some that have multiple examples or multiple versions of the graphic in a single image. And that's usually what you want to go for. You're getting more for your money instead of just getting a single image there. Now we have three different types of chains here. And the great thing about this is that it is seamless. If I were to go to the filter menu and go down here to Other and choose Offset, and you'll notice if I move the vertical slide, you'll notice it completely tiles. You don't see the end of it because the way it's cropped already is that it's a seamless transition there, which is great. So we don't have to worry about getting it to where it's going to match up seamlessly. But I do want to only use one of these chains. So I'm actually going to go and get my rectangular marquee tool and just draw a selection around this third chain over here. I like this kind of newer look of this one on the end here. And I'm just going to go to the Edit menu, go to Copy, and we'll go ahead and create a new document and go ahead and paste it in there. Just press Command or Control V. Now let's go ahead and minimize this existing image. Now the next thing I need to do is extract the image from its white background. Now to do that quickly and easily, I'm just going to use the Magic Wand tool here in the toolbar. So go and select that and click on a white area. I'm going to hold down the Shift key and then continue to click in the remaining white areas around the chain. Well, don't forget to include the outer areas. And then I'm simply going to go to Select Menu and choose Inverse. Now the chain itself is selected. So I'm going to go ahead and press Command or Control J, and that puts the chain on its own layer. If I turn off all the other layers, there we can see the chain is extracted and over the transparent background. So I'm going to go ahead and take those other two layers, the original layer and the background layer, and just go ahead and throw it away. And that will leave us just the chain on a transparent layer. So let's go ahead and take this and save it to, save it as a new file that we can bring into Illustrator. So I'm going to go ahead and do Save As, and let's go ahead and bring this to the desktop. We'll call it Chain 1. Name it whatever you like. That's, of course, your option. So go ahead and save that, and now let's jump over to Illustrator. Now, it's not entirely necessary that you use Photoshop every time. If you've got a graphic that's already seamless and already ready to go, then all you need to do is jump right into Illustrator and do what we're about to do now. So right here in Illustrator CC, I'm just going to go ahead and create a new document, and it looks pretty good. We'll go ahead and do that. Oh, I actually do not want it in CMYK mode, so let's go ahead and twirl that down and make it RGB. I'm not working for print right now, so I'm just going to go ahead and make that RGB, and then we'll click OK. Now, here's our new document. Now, I often, unless I'm working in a specific parameters for a print job or something, I always turn off my artboards because it notice it grays out the rest of the artboard area. So I'm just going to go into the View and choose Hide Artboards there. It gives me a much more wider scope of view and working space. Okay, so let's go to File and go to Place. And we're going to go and look for that chain image. Now, this is very important when you're When you're going to be converting an image into a brush in Illustrator, you need to make sure it's not linked to anything outside of the program. Now, typically when you bring an image in, if you're doing it for a design or layout, you'll click on the link button here, and this will link your placed object to the original file. Now, since we're going to be turning this into a brush, we can't do that. We need to embed it into the program or into this document. So just go ahead and uncheck these elements here and then go ahead and click place. Now it's going to go ahead and just let me drag it out. So there is my chain image. Now what I want to do is convert this into my brush. So I'm going to go to the window menu, go down here and choose brushes, and let's go ahead and bring that brushes panel out here. And one thing to remember when you're going to be creating a brush like this, where it's going to be kind of a seamless thing no matter how long you make it, you need to make sure it is horizontal. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that to a horizontal position and then go ahead and drag it into the brush panel here. Now when you see the new brush panel appear, you'll notice what it allows you to convert it to. You can create a scatter brush, which just takes the element and kind of scatters it all over the page when you paint, and you can actually set those parameters. You can do an art brush, which will only brush whatever it is you're defining here, in fact. So in fact, let's go ahead and do that real quick. Let's go ahead and make it an art brush. And you can see we'll scale it proportionally, and let's scale it down to about 50%. And we'll click OK. So now what happens is when I go and get my brush tool and paint with this, you'll see it stretches it along that object. But I actually wanted to keep the proportions, the original proportions, and not stretch it as you see right here, because it's putting that art along that line there, using only the information it has to stretch it along that line, no matter how long it is. So let's do this again. I'm actually going to throw that one away. Delete the brush. Yes, do that. Now let's do that again. I'm going to drag it over in here, and this time we're going to make a pattern brush. Now when I click OK, I get a different panel, and this allows me to modify the appearance a little bit more accurately, in that I can set the corners so that they are, let's go ahead and do auto-centered, and then we'll go ahead and do, for the inner corners, we'll do auto-centered as well. You have a number of different options here, and this is something that's really great about this feature, is that it automatically sets it up where it will link the corners, and you won't have to line them up like you did before, and that was a really pain in the butt, if you remember. So I'm actually going to do it to fit approximate path, and we'll do that, and let's go again. I'm going to drop it 50% and then click OK. There we go. So now if I go and grab my brush tool and start painting, there you can see the chain looks like it's supposed to. It's keeping its proportions. No matter how long I make it, it's going to maintain that proportion, and now I have a full chain brush, which is something. Really can't do this in Photoshop at all without it being a pain in the neck, and now you're able to do that in Illustrator, and you can of course bring it back to Photoshop if that's something you're wanting to finish it over there. So another great use of Illustrator's brush engine. Now one more example of this, let's go to File, Place again, and I want to get one more example of this, and that is, actually no, let's go back to Photoshop, because I have another image I want to show you. It's another example of this in action. I have another collection of these diamonds here in this image, and it's considerably large. You want to make sure that when you're converting images to brushes, that the images that they're being made from are not gigantic, and what I mean is very high res. You want to make them not insanely small, of course, but you want to make them small enough to where Illustrator can manage it without it being very intensive on your processor. So we'll just kind of zoom that. There we go. All right, so what I want to do is actually grab one of these diamonds. I'm just going to go ahead and grab this one right over here, and I'm just going to use the elliptical marquee, hold down Option and Shift, and drag out a circle from the center here. I'm not worried about getting the entire thing, but just enough of it there. So we'll go to Edit, Copy, New Document once again, and we'll paste it in there. And as before, I will throw away the background layer, leaving the diamond on its transparent background. So we'll go ahead and save this. Diamond 1. Save it to the desktop. That looks great. All right. Close this. No longer need that. Okay. So back over in Illustrator, we're back in that same document. I'm going to go to File, Place. And right there is diamond 1. Again, make sure it's not linked to anything. Just make sure all those are unchecked, and we'll go to Place, and there we have it. Now, just like before, let's take this, drag it into the brush engine. I'm going to make it a pattern brush again. Click OK, and we can set our corners again. Now this time I'm going to use this auto between because it's going to put a kind of like a stylized corner on it, as you can see right there. And we'll do the same thing to the inner corner. And we'll just do auto between. So it gives me something pretty interesting. And of course, you can go back and modify these even after you've created the brush, just by going in and double clicking on the thumbnail for the brush and just edit these features wherever you like. Now, of course, you can flip it along the axis it's on. If you don't like the positioning of it, you can just check on these two items and it will flip it along that line there. And I don't want it to stretch to fit or add space, but I want it to approximate to the path that I create. So we'll get, again, approximate path, click OK. Now, this is great if you were doing some kind of design and you wanted to do a custom frame with a repeated element like this design here. So if I just go ahead and click on that, you can see it adds that element around there, applying the corner elements just like they're supposed to. But if it seemed too big still, I could go in here and just double click and then take the size down to maybe 20. Click OK, and then you can see it's going to ask me, do I want to apply to any existing strokes or leave them as they were? In this case, I want to apply it, and there I have my updated element completely created from a photo brought in from Photoshop. So another great feature with Illustrator CC and being able to take your images, be it from Photoshop or whatever, bring them into Illustrator and make custom image brushes in no time at all. Now, another great feature here in Illustrator CC is being able to create custom patterns. And it's actually a lot of fun using this feature in here inside Illustrator because you can do it with graphics and even photographic elements. So we're going to start by doing it with a symbol element that's already built into Illustrator. So let's go to the window menu here and go to the symbol libraries here toward the bottom. And I'm going to go ahead and choose a group. You got a number of different collections of symbols, symbol libraries built into the program here. So if you have Illustrator, you have everything I'm looking at here. So go into the primitive, and there are a number of different elements in here, different primitive graphics and other clip art, things like that. And you can use them in a number of different ways, but I'm just going to grab like this stick figure right here and drag it out to my my artboard rather. So there it is. Now, go to the window menu and go down here and choose pattern options. Now this pattern options panel will open up, and to make the pattern we're going to simply go to the object menu and go down here to pattern and choose make. And you can see it goes ahead and distributes a pattern, and now we can go into this panel and modify those settings. So we're just going to go ahead and call this primitive pattern 1. And here you can have a number of different options. So you can set the tile type, so if you want it to be a straight grid, or you can make it almost like brick type of fashion where it offsets it just slightly. And you have brick by column, so vertically or horizontally. You can do a hex by column there, so that's pretty cool. And then you can also, if you're using the brick one, you can actually set the offset, how much you want it to be. If you want it to be a half, 3/4, it really depends on what you are looking for. I actually like that hex one like there, like that. And you can, of course, set your width and height just by entering the numbers here, or size to tile if you want. Move tile with art. That's this tile right here in the middle. You can kind of think of this as a control tile in the middle. And you can set your spacing if you didn't want to do that. If you wanted to size tile to art. So if I wanted to set the horizontal spacing, you can do that. Notice there, it's spread it out a little bit more horizontally, and this gives you more control by being able to enter those numbers manually. I like to do it actually a different way. I'll talk about that in just a moment. So you also can control your overlap. If you want the objects right in front or left in front, you can just click on either of these items to adjust that. And then to set the number of copies. Right now it's 5 by 5, but if you wanted to increase the size of it, you can go 9 by 9. You can see the pattern gets considerably larger. So different ways you can go about doing it. I'm just going to put it back. Well, actually, let's put it to 7 by 7 there. Now you can set the dim. All the copies are set to 100%, but you can actually go ahead and drop this to 50. And you'll notice what it does is it makes all the copies dimmed down to 50% and leaves the master graphic right here in the center in the tile at a full 100%. So you can determine, so you can see easily, of course, which one is the master graphic. I'm actually going to bring that up to about 75. You can show the tile edge, which is this blue line right here, and then show swatch bounds. So you can see right there. So there you go. Now, again, all these settings allow you to modify and customize the pattern any way you want. Now, one way I like to do it, because I work visually, is up here in the top left corner, there is this pattern tile tool. When I select that, you'll notice we get control handles around the control tile here, and I can actually adjust the spacing between elements just by moving these elements like this. So notice I can close it in like that. I can get something rather interesting, increase it, and space it out any way I want. So if I decided to do something different like a grid, actually no, let's do brick by row, and we'll close this in a little bit. So I'm basically adjusting. Notice how the width is adjusting as I'm doing this, and the height, if I adjust the height here a little bit, so you'll notice there's those elements there. So a number of different ways to control the pattern. All you're doing is everything that these settings do over here, you're just doing it manually right on the graphic itself. So it gives you a lot of more control over that. So pretty cool. Now, once the pattern is done and you're ready, actually I'm going to adjust this a little bit more. Let's do something like this. Space it out a little bit more like that. I think I liked that hex there. There we go. So I'm going to space that out a little bit more like this. There we go. All right. So that pattern looks pretty good. I'm actually going to go back and change this to 5x5 so I can see a more manageable area there. Now, so let's assume I've got my pattern all set and ready to go. I'm going to go up here to the very top of the window, and you see where it says done. Click on that, and now you can see that pattern is now saved over here in the swatches panel, ready to use at any time. So if I were to create a shape, let's go ahead and just do a kind of a giant oval here, and click on that pattern. Voila, there is my pattern nicely defined, and now it exists in my graphic. So a really fun way to make patterns here inside Illustrator. Now that was of course with a graphic symbol already built inside the program, but what if it was a photo? What if you wanted to do it with an image? Well, I'm going to go over here and do File, Place, and I have a graphic that I want to use for this, and it's simply a wing. So this is wing graphic, and I've gone ahead and extracted it. It's on a transparent layer, just like I did in the previous video. I'm going to go ahead and take that and place it in here as well. Not too large, though. There we go. Just want to make it so we can see what's going on here. So with that selected, I'm going to go again to the object menu, go down here to pattern and choose make. It's going to go ahead and apply the pattern, as you can see right there. And I'm going to go ahead and let's do hex by row. And then using that pattern tool, I'm going to bring it in and make it overlap, as you can see right here. And the closer I get it in and close in the areas there, look at this kind of cool pattern we're getting here just by doing this wing. Now remember those overlap settings. If I go ahead and click on this, I can actually bring the other side forward to get another interesting version of this. I can bring this forward as well. So different configurations when you have a pattern overlapping like this and being able to do different things with it. Let's actually do the brick one. So a lot of fun to be had just by playing around with these different features. Going here in this pattern maker, again, using graphic elements or photos, you can do a whole bunch of different things just by experimenting with all these different settings. And again, as before, when you get it to where you like it and everything looks great, simply go and click on done, and that pattern is saved right here in the swatches panel. If I go and drag out another shape, and there that pattern is filled into my image there. So a lot of fun with that pattern maker. Remember, you can do it to graphic or image elements, just like the image brushes, but in this case, you're creating a custom pattern that you can apply to virtually any shape. Now in this video, we're going to take a look at 3D in Illustrator CC. That's right. You actually do have 3D capabilities here inside Illustrator, and it's been around there for a while. In fact, Illustrator is one of the first programs in the entire Adobe suite to have 3D capabilities. Of course, the Photoshop 3D capabilities now are much more powerful and give you much more realistic 3D, but the 3D capabilities here in Illustrator are very useful, especially for simple graphic design. Now, some of you might remember years and years ago, there was a little program called Adobe Dimensions. It was a small, simple program, but it allowed you to create PostScript 3D. It allowed you to create 3D from simple vector graphics and create various types of 3D elements. It was a very limited program, but certainly gave you some really interesting stuff to start with and then build upon later. Well, what happened was they discontinued that product, and in a couple versions later of Illustrator, they decided to roll those features into Illustrator as a regular feature. It's a normal feature now. So let's have a look at what you can do with this feature. So I'm actually going to start by building a simple graphic. I'm just going to create an oval shape here, and then I'm going to create another one inside of it, just like that. And let's go ahead and just center these. Let's go ahead and just align them together there using an align tool. And then I'm going to go ahead and just do a Pathfinder. Let's go ahead and go to the window and go to Pathfinder here and just do a divide, because I want to knock out this center hole here. It looks like it's a holographic anyway. In fact, if I go ahead and just swap these colors out, you'll see it's just one black fill graphic on top of the other. But if I go ahead and select them both and then click on this first item under Pathfinders in the Pathfinder panel, which is divide, and it's going to go ahead and just separate those two elements. Now, if I have to first ungroup them, so go under the object menu and go down here and choose ungroup, and then select that middle object and hit delete. Now we have a shape that has the center knocked out. So let's go ahead and just add some text inside here, and I'm just going to go ahead and do, we'll go ahead and do 1, because we are KelbyOne. So we'll just go ahead and do some simple text here. I'm going to leave it as editable text in the middle. So go ahead and align this as well, so it's right there in the middle. And there we go. Now, of course, the color I'm not too thrilled with. Black is just kind of boring. So let's go ahead and open up our swatches panel here. And we can see there is our standard colors. And I'm going to go ahead and give this a green fill here. And we'll go ahead and do the same with the text. We'll just do that same color green there. Now, we have two separate objects here. And I want them to be one 3D object whenever I go and create this. So if I select them both now and then do the 3D conversion, it's going to make 3D objects out of each one, and they will position independently. I need it to act as one element, though. So with both objects selected, I go to the object menu and go down here and choose group. That way it treats it as one element no matter which one I select. And that will also be reflected when we make it 3D. So we're ready to go ahead and do that. So simply go to the effect menu, go down here to 3D and choose extrude and bevel. You also can choose revolve and rotate, and we'll talk about those in just a little bit. So extrude and bevel, and you're going to get this large panel opened up. Actually, let's move this graphic over so we can see the graphic and the panel at the same time here. So again, effect 3D, extrude and bevel. Now, by default, this feature is, the preview is actually unchecked by default. So go down here to the very bottom left corner and go ahead and check on preview, and you can see it goes ahead and applies that extrusion to the text. Now, notice here that the sides of the graphic are gray, and that's because of the fill element we've got going on here. So I'm actually going to go ahead and just do ungroup again and change that stroke color on the outer graphic to the same color green we're using now, which is this one right here. And then I'm going to go ahead and regroup those, and then again effect 3D, extrude and bevel. And preview. So now that side is green now. So notice we've got a bunch of different options here. Now, first and foremost up here is the position. And you can go up here and you can choose, if you're familiar with 3D applications, you know that you can look at the front, back, left, right, just by selecting these items and then looking at them from their various sides. But you can also do a custom changing of the orientation. Now, you can't go over here and move the object around like you would normally be able to do in another 3D application, but rather if you go in here and click on this cube and move it around, it corresponds to the position of the object. So if I move the cube this way, the blue of course represents the front face of the object, and then the other sides here represent the other elements as well. So if you just freehand move it around, you'll notice these dials on the side. You can actually move these around if you want to change a specific angle, and you can just rotate these dials or input the numbers manually. You can also move your cursor over certain parts of this cube. Notice if I highlight over this one right here, it allows me to rotate it on that specific axis instead of just freehand rotating it when I just click anywhere on the cube. Putting your cursor over the edges will highlight those elements and allow you to rotate it specific on that axis there. So that is how you reposition your 3D object. Now you have the perspective setting down here, which allows you to get more accurate perspective or more realistic perspective by increasing this number. You can actually get much more exaggerated perspective the higher you go. If I go way up to about 128, you notice how the perspective gets really crazy there. But bringing that down, I usually put it at around 75, and that gives me a good amount of perspective there, as you can see right there. So let's just rotate that element around. So you can see there it is. So the perspective is much more realistic and even in some sense a little bit more dramatic. Now just below that you have the extrude and bevel sections, which allow you to set the depth of the extrusion. Right now it's default at 50 points, but if I just take the slider here and increase it, you'll know notice the depth of the object gets considerably larger. Really simple adjustment there. You can set the cap to be hollow. Notice you can click on this second icon here, and it hollows out the front and back face of the object, leaving only the extruded sides. Or you can go ahead and make it a solid shape just by clicking on that element there. You can also add bevels to it, a number of different bevels that are already preset in here. So if I go ahead and choose classic, you'll notice it gives me a bevel edge around my text and the object, which I can adjust by going in here and adjusting the height to a smaller number if I don't want it to be quite as harsh on the object. And there you can see it adjusts the bevel pretty good. So with that, just adjust the positioning here. There we go. So you can see the bevel and everything looks really great. And we can go over here. You can also, at the just next to the height setting here in the extrude and bevel, you can set the bevel to be outside of the object or inside of the object. So if I wanted to extend it outside or inside, depending on how you want to set it up, you can see the difference there. It's very slight, but really depends on, by setting it to the outside though, you'll notice bevel is added to the original object, and then you can also extend it so it's outside the object as well. So a number of different ways to go there. Now, normally this area down here is turned off. So if I go to fewer options, there you can see this is what the panel will look like when you originally launch it. You will actually see just these basic features right here. You can actually go over here into the surface properties and choose to see wireframe if you want. There you can see that. No shading, which is just put it with no shading at all, and really just loses all definition altogether. Diffuse shading, which is kind of a draft mode in a sense. And then you've got plastic shading, which adds the lighting and everything like that. So typically I like to leave it in plastic shading just so I can see exactly what I'm getting. Normally, or perhaps in the past when processors were much slower, it would have been ideal to go into the no shading or diffuse shading just to catch up with the speed. But now with processors being much more faster, then using plastic shading isn't really as much of a big deal anymore. Now, just below you have a number of different buttons here. Remember, we have the more options here. If I click on that, it is going to reveal the lighting properties on this object. So I can adjust numerous settings like the light intensity, ambient light, highlight intensity, that's the hot spot on the object, highlight size, blend steps, which of course is the quality setting. You'll notice you can see some of the subtle steps in here in this object, but if I were to increase that to maybe say something like 50, then it's basically increasing the number of polygons in the 3D object and making it much more sharper resolution. And then the shading color, you can actually set it to your own custom color or black. Black usually just makes the colors defined a little bit more when it's in the plastic shading mode. And of course down here you have preserve spot colors and draw hidden faces and things like that. So a number of different features if you are familiar with 3D. You can of course go in here and manually adjust these. This graphic here on the left side actually allows you to see where the light is positioned in relation to the object and allows you to move it around. If I grab this little icon here and move it maybe over here to this side, you'll notice the lighting will change on the object and put the light in front of it. Now, if I wanted to put light behind the object, I can actually have this item selected and click this button right here, moves the selected light to the back of the object. So it'll throw it in the back, and now the light is in the background. So if I move it more over here, or off to the side here, you can see lighting is coming more from the back, and I can actually add a second light and position that more in the front here. So you can add multiple lights, and each one is serving a different function. Maybe the intensity of this backlight isn't quite as much as the one in front of it. So we'll drop that to 50, just so it illuminates the sides a little bit more, and do things like that. So there's adjusting the lighting. Now you can go down here and map art to your 3D objects as well. If I go and click on map art, you'll notice that we've got a wireframe of a certain section of this 3D object. Now if you go to the surface menu here and toggle through, you can jump around to different elements of the 3D object, as you see right here. And there's a red outline here that on the original object that'll let you know what element you're working on. But I'm actually going to bring it back to that front face. Now, the way to add art to a 3D object is you have to convert it to a symbol here inside Illustrator, because you access the symbol library right here from within the map art window. So in this symbol menu, I'm just going to go over here and choose a random graphic. We'll just do this vector element here. It shows up in that element, and I'm going to move it to where I might see a visible area of the graphic. And there you can see it appears on the graphic right there. Now you can scale it to fit. If I do that, it'll actually scale the object to fit the entire area, and you'll notice there's those splotches on my 3D object. You can clear it, clear all of them if you've got multiple elements in here. Shade the artwork, which makes your processing a little bit slower, but it will pick up the lighting and shading that's on the original object when you have this item checked on. And you can also do invisible geometry. Now what this does is when you check it on, it allows you to just see the mapped artwork that's on there. So if you see we're using that splash element, that's all we're going to see when we turn that particular element on. So if it's a graphic element you want to wrap around a 3D object, but just see that element, this is what you would do, is wrap it in here and then turn on invisible geometry. But I don't want to do that in this case. I actually want to see my graphic, so I'll go ahead and do that. So once I'm done, I'll go ahead and click OK, and there we have it. So then once all your settings are in place, you've got it positioned where you want, you simply click OK, and there you have your 3D object now inside of Illustrator. Now, looking at this object, let's say I wanted to perhaps change the text. Well, I can go over here and actually still highlight my text, even though it's in 3D, and go ahead and retype new text in here. So I just did 1, I'll change it to 2, not having to go back and redo it. It's live. It's a live effect, which allows me to change it right then and there. Now, let's say, for instance, I've done this, and now I want to do something like maybe change the mapped artwork, or maybe I want to change the position of the 3D object altogether. Well, you might think, well, I hit OK, now I'm committed, I'm done. I have to live with it as it is. Not necessarily. If you go to the window menu and go down here and and select Appearance, you will open up the Appearance panel. Now when I select the object, you'll notice it shows me all the attributes assigned to this particular vector object. One of them being, of course, 3D Extrude and Bevel. Simply click on that hot link and it will reopen the 3D Extrude and Bevel options panel, allowing you to make further changes from where you left off. Now, of course, that preview button is unchecked again, so you have to go ahead and check that on so you can see the preview and then continue to change the artwork any way you like. So that is creating an extruded and beveled element. Now let's go ahead and let's actually throw this away. Let's actually throw that and bring it back to the original element. And remember, there were two other items there. If you go to the 3D menu again, you have Revolve, which actually, let's do a Revolve with a different one. So if you're familiar with 3D, Revolve is actually like lathing an object. And I'm just going to do a really quick side of a glass here. We'll just kind of do this kind of really just quick improv champagne glass here, or drinking glass of some sort. It's always the go-to when you're doing these Revolve demos is do the half glass object, which is always a popular thing. It really demonstrates, the reason is because it demonstrates well the Revolve feature here. So let's go ahead and take that and close it up there. Now, ordinarily I would probably clean this up, but for the sake of this demonstration, it works just fine. So we have half the glass there. So I'll go ahead into the effect menu, again to 3D, and choose Revolve. And we'll go ahead and turn on Preview. And you can see it revolves the object around like that, where of course we have all the other features available to us. Now, of course, I created this where the edge, the left edge, is the flat edge, and that's what this is set by default here. But if you go into here, you can actually do it from the right edge, and it will revolve it based on this side here. So you don't have to go ahead and create the graphic and have it facing a specific side. You can just go ahead and choose right or left edge here in the revolve section. So that's creating a revolved element. And you can also put elements in 3D. If you're familiar with Photoshop and creating a 3D postcard, which is taking a flat 2D element and simply putting it in a 3D space, not creating volume or depth or anything like that, but rather just putting it in 3D space so you can manipulate it. Same thing here with this last feature, which is 3D rotate. Puts it in 3D space and allows you to go over here and just move the object around. Let's actually turn on preview. So I'm rotating this in 3D, but it is not extruded or has any beveling or anything like that. So if you wanted to put a 2D graphic in a 3-dimension, you know, if you want to match perspective on a graphic element or a sign or something like that, then this feature will certainly come in helpful with that, being able to manipulate it in 3D while keeping it a flat 2-dimensional object. So there's different ways to take advantage of 3D here inside Illustrator. In fact, well, before 3D came along inside Photoshop, what I would do is go over here in Illustrator, bring or build my models, be it text or an object or something like that, here in Illustrator, do the shading as best I could, and then I would bring that element over to Photoshop and then dress it and add the effects that way. I, of course, didn't have the ability to go back and modify the 3D object after I did that. However, it was a quick and easy way to get 3D into Photoshop. And of course, now with Photoshop's 3D capabilities, you can do much more than you used to be able to. But when you want simple 3D in Illustrator, it's there and available, and you can use it anytime to get some really good 3D graphics. So you might remember back in the 3D lesson of this course, I had used the appearance panel to be able to go back in and edit my 3D object after I had created it. It gives you the ability to go back and modify the changes even after it's done. But in this video, I wanted to expand a little bit more on the appearance panel and what you can really do with it and really get a good idea of how it works. Now, it's essentially like the layers panel. Now, Illustrator does in fact have its own layers panel where you can actually group graphic elements together and stack them in their various layers. But the appearance panel works a little bit differently. In this example, I'm just going to create a road, a simple graphic of a road, and it'll give you an idea of what you can really do because we're going to do it all from within the appearance panel. So I'm going to go in here in my toolbar and just grab the pen tool and just put a vertical line. I'm holding down the shift key and put a vertical line across my document here. Then let's go to the window and go to appearance. Now, inside the appearance panel, you have it'll show you whatever attributes apply to whatever object is selected. So right now I have this stroke element. I know over here in the toolbar that this stroke element has no fill, and the stroke color is black. That same information is here in the appearance panel. I have a path. It's got a stroke color of black, and it's 1 point thick. The opacity is by default. I can go over here and just modify that just by clicking on it. When you see it like this, it's like a hot link when it's colored like that, allowing you to click on it and modify whatever that property is. And we have no fill on it. It's also got an opacity free feature as well. But currently we have no fill, so we're not even going to bother with that. So on this original stroke layer, I'm going to click on the stroke element and set the width to 50. And I'm going to zoom in just a little bit here. Actually, no, let's go a little bit. Let's go large. Let's go 100. And then what I'm going to do is duplicate this element. So I'm going to take that stroke element, drag it down to the new icon, and go ahead and create a second stroke element. And what I'm going to do there is change it to white. And then I'm going to make the stroke a little bit thinner to about 90. Notice how it closes it in a little bit. Then I'm going to make another stroke duplicate, and then I once again set this one to black, and then drop that width to around 80. And this gives me the two outer white lines of my road. I might make those a little bit thinner. Let's do it like 85. There we go. So we're still on just one stroke. We're applying this to one stroke, yet we're creating a full graphic element here. It's really cool. So now I want to create the two double yellow lines, in the middle of the road. So let's make another duplicate, and we'll change it to that yellow color, and we'll bring the size of this down dramatically to around maybe 20. Now let's bring it lower. Let's go about 10. There we go. So there's that center line, but I want it to be a double line, remember. So again, duplicate that stroke element. We'll change the color to black, knock this down to, let's start with 5 and see what we get. So there we go. So there is our road graphic element. We did it with one simple stroke, and by duplicating the stroke elements and applying different attributes to each one ultimately results in this really cool graphic element. And you can do that with anything. You can do it with fills. You can actually stack many fills up on top of one another. For instance, if I have a graphic element here, and let's go ahead and give this a simple color fill. Let's do like a green here. Actually make it a fill, not a stroke. There we go. And let's say I wanted to add kind of a fade to this, but didn't want to really fade the colors. I just want to do kind of like a blending effect. Well, all you need to do is just simply duplicate that fill element, change the fill to a gradient. So let's go ahead and get the default black and white gradient. And then remember that opacity setting? Click on that and change the blend mode to something like overlay. So now you have this varying tone graphic. It's still one element. It isn't two elements, one put on top of the other and then the blending mode changed on a separate element to get that effect. It's still one graphic element. We've simply changed and added numerous properties to it via the appearance panel here. And you can do other things too. In this menu right here, you can go ahead and add effects to it, which you can go ahead and modify at any time. For instance, if I wanted to add a drop shadow to this graphic. So we'll go ahead and see the preview. There's my drop shadow. If I want to make any setting changes if I wanted to, click OK. But if I do that and I'm thinking later, oh, I didn't want to do that. I want to go ahead and change that shadow or modify that shadow somewhat. Well, I don't have to go back and redo it, undo, and then go back and redo it. Just go back into that drop shadow settings, open it up. It will bring you where you left off, showing you the previous settings. So if I wanted to make the opacity a little bit less, preview that. There it is. Looks pretty good. Click OK, and we're good to go. So a lot of really cool things you can do here with the appearance panel. Now, back to my little street graphic here. Down here next to the effects, you can actually add a new fill or new stroke by just doing it down here. But again, like I was doing earlier, I was simply just modifying it by duplicating the existing strokes and then modifying the settings there. But what to do with this street graphic element when you're done? Well, if you go into the window menu and open up graphic styles, because if you go through the troubles of creating an effect or whatever here inside the appearance panel, you don't want to have to do it all over again when you want to do that effect again. You want to be able to just, save it as a preset and then use it whatever you want. So once you have all that done, you'll grab the little preview icon here next to the word path, drag that to the graphic styles panel, and voila, your graphic is now saved. So if I have any kind of graphic element like this road here, I can simply apply my road graphic to that. And there I have the world's smallest oval racetrack right there. But what I like to do, and this is something we did in the very first lesson, is create a brush out of it. So if I go and open up the brushes panel, and again, it's horizontal. I'm going to make sure it's horizontal when we define the brush like this. I'm going to drag this into the brushes panel. I want it to be a pattern brush. That's fine. You can either do an art or pattern brush. It really doesn't matter. And we'll set, it's already got the corner mode set. We'll set this one here auto-centered as well. And I'm going to actually drop the size to 50%. And we'll approximate path. Everything looks good. Now, I can actually draw my road with my paintbrush like that. Creating an element like that. So, a number of different ways you can go about doing it. Now, let's go ahead and delete these. But isn't that pretty cool? You can just kind of paint that around and everything goes out. Now notice how it overlaps on the road here. That's good and that's realistic. But what if you were to define it as an art brush? So that's creating a pattern brush. Let's take that same element and drag it in here to grab that stroke and make it an art brush. So we'll go ahead and click on that. So I don't want it to stretch. I'm going to scale it proportionately. Again, I'm going to drop the size to 50%. And all that looks pretty good. We'll click OK. Now again, with the same brush, I'm going to paint. Now notice what happens when they intersect. If you're still on the same stroke and you cross paths, they will actually merge with each other like that. And that's when it's an art brush. So that's another really cool aspect of this when you want to create an intersection like that. But if you're also using the art brush and you want them to overlap, just make a stroke and then release and then start a new one. And you'll have it overlapping like that. But this one, of course, has got it proportionate to the stroke that I made. So just remember, if you want the elements to intersect like that, make it an art brush. If you just want to make regular roads, then you can make it a pattern brush as well. But the point here is, of course, the appearance panel. Anything and everything that has to do with an object in Illustrator. When it's selected, any attributes applied to it, whether it's simple stroke or fills, or any effects or anything like that, you will manage and adjust and modify here inside the appearance panel. Very important panel. Make sure you play with it, experiment with it. It's a lot of fun to play around with. Now in this video, I want to talk about how you can utilize Illustrator to go about recreating a logo. Oftentimes our work doesn't always involve creating a brand new logo, but rather it involves recreating or improving upon an existing logo. Now, as a designer throughout the years, I have been given numerous logos by clients that have been things ripped off the internet that are just very, very low res, and they want to blow it up, or just they want to clean it up or do something like that. So I just want to show you a few different approaches to go about cleaning up and then ultimately reworking a logo to get nice, clean vector lines out of it. And there's a number of different ways we can go about doing this, because there are a number of different scenarios in how you might receive a logo. So here, for instance, I have this one that is pretty good shape. It's got, it's not too difficult. There's not really much going on that makes it a really difficult one. But let's assume, for instance, this was given to me by a client, and I can see that it's not a very large file. It's not very high res. I can see that it's, 1,000 by 875 pixels. That's not very big. That's barely screen size. And let's say this client wants it to be something that they're going to use on a poster or a banner or, whatever. So we want to clean it up. But converting it as it is going to be pretty difficult, and I want the shape is clear enough to where I could use image trace in Illustrator to be able to do this, but I want to simplify it as much as I can in Photoshop before I do that. So I'm going to go ahead and bring out the channels palette here. I'm going to go ahead and remove the color on the image. I'm just going to press Shift Command U because the color right now is irrelevant. We can work on that later. I'm just trying to get the graphics sorted out. So with the color removed, I can see that I've got some varying gray tones here. I'm actually going to bring up levels. Just press Command or Control L. Grab the shadow eyedropper and click on the background. Forces the background to black. Then I'm going to grab the white eyedropper tool and then click in the darkest area of the logo, which is this darker gray right here. I'm going to click once. It's going to force pretty much the entire logo to white. Then I'm just going to tweak the sliders here just so I can know I can guarantee that the background is black and the shape is white. So we get a nice clean graphic here. So I'm going to click OK. Then I'm going to invert the graphic. Just simply press Command or Control I, and then I can see that it's a nice black and white graphic now. So you can see the channels. They're all the same, and it's just a straight black and white graphic now. This is the simplest form I can make it. Now I'm going to bring it over into Illustrator. So let's just go to do Save As, and we'll save it to the desktop. We'll call it Logo Working, and then we'll save that as a PSD. Make sure that you save it as a PSD. If you resave it as a JPEG, you are diminishing the quality even more so. So if you're already dealing with a pretty bad quality logo, you're just going to make it worse. So go ahead and save it as a PSD file to the desktop, and there we have it. So let's jump over to Illustrator, and let's go ahead and bring that file in. I'm going to go to File, Place, and locate that logo, place it in here, and then drag it out. Now you can see it's pretty clean, so I'm simply going to do image trace here up here in the options bar. I'm just going to click on image trace, and it pretty much converted it already. So I'll just click on the expand button here, and we can see that it already is vector art. I'm going to go ahead and ungroup the elements and select the background. I don't need that background white shape or the shape inside, so we'll ungroup again and then just hit delete, and there we have a nice clean logo that we can work with. So we can go over here and just clean up some of these dots and everything like that, but we were able to, on the front end in Photoshop, clean it up as best we could as far as the pixels were concerned, remove the color, and this just makes the job easier for image trace inside of Illustrator here to make it a nice clean version of the logo. So that was pretty simple. It's a relatively simple approach with recreating a logo. Sometimes you're going to run into scenarios where you're going to need to do a little bit more work than that. Now let's, here I have this logo here that again is a relatively small JPEG, and let's just say I've got a client that wants me to recreate this as a vector art file. Well, looking at it, it doesn't really look that difficult, but there's going to be a little bit more involved than the previous one because I can't really use image trace in this because it is going to, there are some smaller elements like these small stars. There's a few gradient elements in here that's going to be red and everything like that. Image trace just isn't going to work, and I'm going to have to pretty much rebuild it from scratch, which isn't a problem, but this gives you a good idea of what how you can approach doing something like this. Now, the object is obviously loose on my artboard. I need to lock it in place so I don't accidentally select it and move it while I'm recreating the logo here. So I'm going to press Command or Control 2, or you can go under the Object menu, go to Lock, and choose Selection. So now I can't select it or move it or do anything like that. Now, all I'm going to do now is basically trace over the elements. Now, when I do this, I'm going to go ahead and use the pen tool, of course, and I set the color to something that's really outrageous, because all I'm doing here is really creating the shapes right now. So I need to be able to have it a loud color that I can see really well. So that green will work really well against the blue. So let's start first with the center shape. I'm going to go ahead and grab my ellipse shape tool. And one thing I need to do first is actually set some guides up. So I'm going to actually press Command or Control R. It brings up the rulers here. I'm going to drag out a vertical guide and put it right in the center of my logo here. Pretty much as best as I can center it right there. And that will be kind of a baseline for how I'm going to build the graphic here. So let's go ahead and drag out a center one. Isn't going to be perfect, but it will give me a good place to start. So with that ellipse shape tool, I'm just going to go in the center here, hold down the Option key on Mac, Alt on Windows, as well as the Shift key, and we'll drag out a circle from the center there. Pretty much the same size as the original there. There we go. I don't want it to have a fill because I got to be able to see what's going on behind the shape. So you can see the green line. It gives me a good idea of what's going on here. So again, with that same shape tool, I'm going to drag out the second shape, which is the inner circle here. There we go. And there we have that. Now, when it comes to symmetrical elements like these wings that are emitting out of the side of the logo, you just want to really create one side. You want both sides to be mirrored. So you really only need to create one side and then mirror it to the other side. You don't have to create the entire shape. So let's zoom in a little bit here. And I'm going to, again, using the pen tool, I'm going to start in the center right here. Click in, create a path. I'm going to go up in here, just like this, and then come over here. That's a little too high, but we can adjust that. And then close out the shape right there. Now, for the straight angles, up and down, left to right, I'm holding down the Shift key as I click, and then just letting the Shift key go when I need to get an angle like that, and just connect the dots, basically. Now, I can see I need to adjust the positioning of that top line there. So I'm just going to grab my Direct Select tool, grab it, and then just nudge it down a little bit. I am holding down the Shift key again as I drag it down to maintain the up and down movement there. So there's that one shape. Now let's do this other shape. So again, start at a corner. I'm going to go all the way to the center path because I got to come all the way down. Again, holding down the Shift key here, releasing the Shift key to come down this angle, Shift key down again to get this hard angle here, and then releasing it, and then closing out the shape there. There we go. So there's that shape. Now, don't worry about where it's cut off here. We're going to tackle that in just a little bit. Lastly, let's create the shape here. We'll go up here, just like that, and come down here. And then again, holding down the Shift key so I get that straight line across here. And then up and close out the shape right up there. Now, again, I'm going to grab that Direct Select tool and position this down right about here. So I've got one entire side of the shapes created. So let's go ahead and select those three shapes to actually get the main selection tool, and then select those three shapes. Then we're going to jump over here to the toolbar, and grouped with the Rotate tool, you will find the Reflect tool in here. So go ahead and select that. And when you select it, you'll see this. The center anchor point shows up on the graphic here. Well, I'm going to grab that and put it down at the very bottom control point on this original shape we created. That's right against the guide here. Then you're going to hold down Option key on Mac, and then the Shift key, and then drag to the right, and you'll notice it flips and mirrors that graphic. We'll do that again. We're going to take, so let's make sure we've got just those three shapes selected. Grab the Reflect tool, grab the anchor point, position it at the bottom control point, should snap to it. Then hold down Option, so it'll create the duplicate, and then Shift, so it'll constrain it to the left and right plane. Click and drag to the right, and it mirrors the shapes. So there you have it. So now we just need to combine this bottom shape. So I'm going to select both of those shapes, and we'll open up the Pathfinder tool and just hit combine here. And now that makes it one shape, as you can see right there. Now, we need to cut off these rounded areas of this shape here. So to select that outer circle, again, we're going to copy it to the clipboard, copy, and then paste in place. And then just hold down the Shift and Option so it keeps it scaling it from the center, and drag out that circle until it lines up with that edge right there. Now it's okay if it's a tiny bit off. It's okay. We can manage that and sort that out later. It isn't completely lined up anyway because of the nature of the logo. But with that shape out there, I'm going to hold down the Shift key and add the other two shapes to it, and then go down here in that same Pathfinder and hit Divide, which is under the Pathfinder. It's the first tab under here. Then go under the Object menu and choose Ungroup. When you divide them like that, it does in fact separate them, but it also puts them in a group and keeps them together. So choose Ungroup. It may take a couple of times. Actually, it's good now. And then just go and select the shapes you don't want and hit Delete. So we don't want this outer shape here. We don't want this shape here. Don't need that one. We don't need this inner shape right here. So all the extra shapes we don't need, we're just going in and deleting. And there we have it. All right. So I'm going to take this line here. It's kind of in... There we go. Let's drag that down a little bit there. There we go. Now, we've got this shape, and we've got this outer circle and this shape down here. I'm going to go ahead and combine those, selecting that outer circle and this bottom upside-down triangle, and again combine those. So now all the elements are starting to come into play now. So now we have the stars left. So we're going to actually have a star shape built inside Illustrator. I'm just going to go into Shape Tools, grab the star, and just again Option Shift from the center, drag out the shape till it covers it, and then just hold down the Option key and click and drag duplicates and position them over each of the original stars. This is why it's easier to recreate a logo than to design a whole new one, because you're basically just tracing over the original object, but you're producing a cleaner vector version of the logo as well when you're doing this. And we'll just put another star right here, but we need to scale this one down because of the ones inside the circle here are considerably smaller. Let's do that, and we'll again, now I'm going to drag one straight down, so I'm going to Option Shift drag, and then drag it down. It's dragging a duplicate down. And again, with a duplicate over here on this side, and then bring another duplicate over to this side. Now let's use the arrow keys to kind of nudge that in place, and there we go. So now I'm going to take all those lines, select them all, and just move it up above the existing one here. And there's our clean vector version of the logo. Now we just need to apply the colors. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my eyedropper tool. And I'm just going to go ahead and select each of the individual shapes here. So we know what's going to be the dark blue. So we have this shape, holding down the Shift key and select that shape and this shape. And we'll just get that eyedropper and just click on the shape, and it applies the color. Now, instead of going in and switching out the tools each and every time, while you have the eyedropper tool selected, just hold down the Command key and you can go ahead and select the next shape. And that one ended up behind this one. Let's go send it back on that one. Select this inner circle here, apply that color there. Again, holding down the Command key, holding on, select this outer shape here, add the Shift key, and add this to it. And then we'll add the stars. Again, I'm holding down Command and Shift, which is temporarily letting me use the Select tool, and Shift is allowing me to select multiple objects. And then when I release, I've still got my eyedropper tool, select the gray, there we go. And then we just need to select the individual stars inside of the shape here. Get that last one there, and then there we go. And then we'll just, because it's a little bit lighter gray, so we'll sample the gray inside here. And there we have it. For a second there, I was wondering why this got cut off at the bottom here, but it's because it's still behind the original logo there. But there we have a nice, clean vector version of the JPEG logo that we just created. Now, in the next video, I have a little bonus. I actually asked some of my followers on Facebook to send me any logos they have, any poor quality logos, so they can see how a logo comes together. So I actually have one that a user sent me. It's a relatively simple logo, but there's a really interesting way you can go about recreating it, and that's what we're going to take a look at in the next video. So let's have a look. Now, continuing on with vectorizing logos, if you remember in the last video, I had mentioned that I had sent out a request on Facebook and asked if there was anyone that had a logo, low quality logo that they wanted to have cleaned up, just so we can have a real life scenario in the sense of how a client would give you a logo and then you would go about recreating it. Well, thanks to Robert Blake, sent me this relatively simple logo, but at first glance it looks simple enough, but there's more going on here than you may realize. If we zoom in, you can see that there is a number of different varying colored strokes in here and things like that. Now, some of it's kind of like a bevel effect and some shading and stuff like that. I'm not going to worry about that. Let's assume we want to recreate this as a flat vector graphic. Since flat design is really in right now, basically we want to repurpose this. And I'm not going to worry about the glare on it right now. That's certainly something we can add later, also in Illustrator. But right now I'm worried about just recreating the ultimate shape, the overall shape, and getting all these varying strokes in here. So let's start with the basic shape itself. Well, as we did in the last video, I'm going to go ahead and lock this in place by pressing Command or Control 2. And that allows me, or prevents me from accidentally selecting it, repositioning it when I'm building the elements here. And I'm going to go ahead and bring up my rulers and drag out a center ruler here, so it's right there on the center mark. And then let's go ahead and use the pen tool and start creating the shape. Now I'm going to go ahead and choose, as I did before, a really wild color that will stand out. So against this green graphic, let's do like a pink here. And let's go ahead and start at the top here. Now you want to create whatever line is going to be flush to the vertical guide. You want to create that first. So I'm going to actually start in the bottom area here and then go up to the top and then click, and that creates my shape. And then we'll zoom out here. Let's go ahead and just continue the path around the object. And we'll go around like this. Now I'm actually going to undo that because I don't want it to have a pink fill, but rather a pink stroke there. There we go. So we'll just drag that shape out again. And I'm holding down the Shift key at this bottom one so it keeps it straight, and there we go, like that. So now I can tell my stroke is very thin, so let's actually thicken that up a little bit. And I can adjust the positioning just a little bit, but let's get the overall shape in place. So again, continuing with the pen tool. Now I'm not going all the way to the edge of the line. Notice it doesn't do that here in the original graphic, but rather it stops right about here. And I had to undo that, so let me go ahead and just increase my thickness again. There we go. Okay. Continuing on, I'm just going to go ahead and click on where I left off, go up and just add the path there. I'm holding down the Shift key again to constrain on these straight lines here, and when I get to a curve, I'm just going to let it go and just drag the curve out. And then close out the shape there. I'm going to redo those last two here. This is where a lot of pen tool practice comes in on getting the curve just right on these things, is getting the control points in the perfect position for this. So let's just drag that out there. And that closes out the shape there. So now I'm just going to look at it and see where I might need to make any adjustments by dragging the shape down here. Let's just kind of tweaking the curve here just so we can get it as close as possible to the original curve. Let's just bring that one up slightly there. I think that will work. There we go. Okay. So we have one side shift. This is a symmetrical logo, so we only had to create the one side. So I'm going to select that one, and again go and select that reflect tool, and let's position the anchor point. It's in the center of the graphic. I'm going to position it on the edge that is against the guide at one of those guide points there, and then again hold down Option and Shift and drag to the right, And there's my duplicate. Now, to combine these, I could use the Pathfinder, but I want to show you another tool that's really helpful in combining shapes. If you have both items selected, jump over here to the toolbar and you have the Shape Builder tool. This allows you to just drag between the two objects and merge them together like that. And notice now, it's one shape. Pretty cool. So our shape is done. I'm going to move it over to the side and now do a side by side, and we can now color it the way we want to. So again, we're going to need that appearance panel. I'm just going to go ahead into the window menu and go to appearance, and we'll go ahead and drag that out. And let's start with the base fill color, which is going to be, of course, this green. So we'll go ahead and do the green fill there. Now here in the appearance panel, it works like a layers panel. It's what basically from the top down is what's visible. So the stroke color here, I want to go ahead and set this to the black, which is going to be that base black in the background there, and increase this to about 25. Now, why is it not showing up? Because I don't have the object selected. So make sure your object is selected and then apply the color, and then let's increase the size of the stroke there. Now, I want to position this so that the shape is above the stroke. So just grab the fill and position it above the stroke in this, and now you only see the stroke on the outside of the shape there. So that stroke is probably a little thicker than it needs to be. Let's bring it back down to about 20. There we go. All right. Now, continuing on with the shape tool, let's look at what we have going on in this shape. So we've got the outer black shape. Next is a kind of gray line there. So let's go ahead and add that as another stroke. So I'm going to make a duplicate of the stroke fill, change the color to a light gray, and then decrease the size until, well, it's a little bit closer there, something about like that. There we go. Okay. Then we have the next color, which is white. So we'll go ahead and make another duplicate of the stroke, set the color to white, and then again bring that size down, and there's the shape right there. This is, of course, assuming you wanted to keep all these stroke colors in here, but you can see we're doing this with one object. We're not creating object on top of object to create the overall look here. I'm actually going to increase that white stroke just a little bit more, like that. There we go. Now, we have the base green shape. Now I have two inner strokes here, a little bit darker green, and then this little bit lighter than that green. So just two different shades of green on the inside of it. So I'm going to make a new stroke altogether and position that above the fill. And that I'm going to change the color to a little bit darker green. Let's do something like this. Well, that's a little bit. Something like that I think will do fine. Now I'm going to open up the stroke panel. Go to window, go to stroke, and we'll go ahead and drag it out here. And with that stroke selected, I'm just going to double click to bring out all the features here. And I want to align this stroke to the inside of that shape. So if I click the center mark here, you'll see the stroke now jumps to the inside. It's a little too thick, so let's make it about a 3. We can always adjust this later, so let's put it around 5 there. There we go. And I think the green color is just a little off, so let's go with something like this. Actually, make sure that object is selected, of course. And there we go. Something like that. Then we'll go ahead and create another stroke element. And we'll go with a lighter green on this one and increase the size to 7. Now, it is overpowering the one underneath it, that darker green. So let's actually position this underneath that stroke, and there we have that now. So this blue-green's a little off here. I don't want to necessarily use that. There we go. So, but there we pretty much have it. So I can go in here and just tweak the thicknesses of each one of these strokes, but we've got it all on one object and able to edit it using the appearance panel. Now, one thing I'm going to do is adjust that black stroke. I'm going to select that in here and then just set the cap, well, set the corner and cap so there's a little bit of an edge there. Notice how it's got rounded edges on the outside there. So just set the cap and corner to the rounded edge and you'll get that much more rounded element there. In fact, I'm going to increase the thickness again to about 23 on that black one. There we go. But there we pretty much have it. So we've taken this really low res logo and been able to trace it, create it, and create the symmetrical version of the logo based on the shape, and then using the appearance panel, still keeping it one simple shape and applying multiple strokes stacked on top of each other to ultimately create the same visual effect here. Obviously, I need to tweak the colors a little bit, but hopefully you get the idea of how you can go about recreating logos and utilizing the more efficient features of Illustrator, like the appearance panel, to make it much more quicker and easier. And of course, you can save this appearance like we did in the appearance video a while ago. If I go to gradient style, if this is some kind of theme you're going to use often, take that appearance and just drag it into the graphic styles panel, and now you have it saved. So if you create other elements for your business and you want to keep the theme going on here, just apply it on there, then you can carry that theme almost to any graphic you create. Pretty cool, huh? Once again, thank you to Robert Blake for sending me this logo so I could recreate it and give him a nice clean vector version of it. I'm going to tweak it a little bit, go ahead and send it back to him. And let's continue on talking about more cool stuff here in Illustrator CC. Now, another fun aspect of the image trace feature is the ability to have fun with photographs. Now, as you saw in the previous video, we recreated a logo utilizing image trace, and that was a relatively simple aspect of it. But what if you wanted to do it to a photo? You actually can. You can actually bring images and do very stylized things to your images, like this one of this jet skier I've got here in Photoshop. It's a really cool shot that's got a lot of splashes and things going on and other elements like that. I think it'd be a lot of fun to bring it into Illustrator and see what we can do by converting it to vector art. So let's go ahead and close this out, jump over to Illustrator, and we're going to create a new document. RGB, everything looks great. And I'm going to go ahead and hide the artboards. Again, Shift-Command-H will hide that for me, and we'll zoom out so I'm at 100%. Now, I have my image trace panel here already open. If you don't already have it open, which you probably wouldn't since you were just starting this video, but if you don't, go ahead into the window menu and go down here and choose image trace, and this panel will go ahead and appear. Now let's go to the file place menu and locate our jet ski image. There it is right there. We'll go ahead and place it in. There we go. All right. So now inside of the image trace panel with the object or image selected here in the artboard, go down to the very bottom of the panel and check on preview. Now it's going to go ahead and start processing it based on the default settings here in the panel. You'll notice it went ahead and converted it to black and white because that is what the mode is currently set to. But we'll get to that in just a moment. So let's start at the top of the panel. And you've got a number of different presets right up here at the top for auto color, high color, low color, grayscale, black and white, and outline. Just by clicking on any one of these, we'll apply that preset setting to your object. Now, presets in image trace really are starting points because every image is going to behave differently and every image is going to have a varying set of tones. So you're always going to find yourself tweaking these settings. But a preset is a really good place to start. So you can actually go in the preset menu and choose things like high fidelity photo. And depending on your processor, it may or may not take a little bit of time for it to process the image. But once it does that, you'll see in just a second what it's going to return for you. So it's processing it. Again, depending on the complexity of your images and the number of tones in it, this could take a little bit or just a few seconds, as you can see right there. Now, in this particular transition, it very much looks like the original photo. Now, if you look really, really closely, you'll notice it's merely made up of very small vector elements while still maintaining the photographic quality of the image. And that's pretty good, but we're going to adjust a few things a little bit later. Now, going back to the presets, we've started with the preset. We're going to modify some things, of course. Now, if you find yourself working on images all the time and applying very similar settings to each one of them, you can, of course, make your own preset right here. just by going to this little menu and choosing Save as New Preset. You can also go right under there where this little eyeball is. Clicking on this will actually, if you click and hold, it will actually reveal the original image. So you can see toggle right between what used to be there and what is there now. So it's a quick way to go back and forth there. Instead of doing the preview, because if you uncheck preview and check it back on, it's going to reprocess everything and you're going to have to wait a little bit longer. This is just a quicker method of getting that checking that original there. So you can actually view the tracing result, which is what I always leave it on. You can view it with the outlines alone. You can do outlines with the source image or the source image alone itself, which I don't really understand why you would want to see just the source image, because they're converting it to vector. You need to see how it's going to look. So go ahead and just leave it on tracing result. And the mode is now color because we changed the preset. And then the palette is full tone, as you can see right here. Now you have a dial down here for the number of colors you see in the image. And what this does is really simplifies the image the fewer colors you set. For instance, if I set this to, let's say, 5 and hit enter, it's going to go ahead and reprocess the image. You're going to find it turn into a much more simplified version of the graphic because it's using less colors, considerably less. It's using 5 colors now. So now it looks much more stylized, more like illustrated artwork. But the problem is it's a little too simplistic for what I'm wanting it for. So I'm actually going to boost this to around, let's try 50, which is pretty much right in the center there. So we'll do 50 and we'll let it process that. Again, depending on the processor speed you have on your machine, this making these changes can take a few seconds. But fortunately, I'm running a relatively fast MacBook Pro laptop here, and that looks pretty good. Okay, so there's a good amount of vector. It's lost a lot of the original detail, which is what I want. I wanted to simplify it by converting it to vector, but not too much. So that looks pretty good. Now, ordinarily, you would just see this panel like this, but if you twirl down the advanced features, you can actually adjust the number of paths in the image, corners, and noise. Now, this determines the simplicity of the image that much more just by moving these dials back and forth. Now, again, there is no one formula for every image. This is something you're just going to have to go in here, move these sliders back and forth, and see what the results you get. And then that will tell you. And as you do it more and more, habit will tell you what settings work or which directions work more than others. In this case, however, I like what I'm looking at, so I'm going to go ahead and leave these advanced settings where they are and twirl that down. Actually, now one more element in here is the method. And you can actually, where it creates cutouts of the paths or where they overlap. Now, by default, it just has it overlapping, so I'm going to go ahead and leave it at that. So everything looks pretty good. I'm not going to set any stroke or anything like that or any snaps to curves. I don't need to do anything like that. So pretty much done. All I need to do now is go up here to the options bar and click on expand. And that's going to expand the artwork to actual vector shapes. So you can see all these blue lines represent all the vector shapes that were created when we did this image trace here. Now, just to make things interesting, I'm going to remove a few elements here. So I'm first going to go into the object menu. You go down here and choose ungroup. And so make sure that each of the elements actually going to have to do it a few times here. Ungroup. There we go. So now I can select individual elements. But what I want to do is go over here into the toolbar and grab the lasso tool, because this does something really interesting. I'm going to actually drag and select this upper area here. Now it selects some control points, but not all of them. Actually, press delete 2 times, and you can see it gets rid of a handful of the elements there. So let's just kind of go around the edge here. So we're trying to get rid of those harsh edges and create a more stylized edge by selecting these and just hitting delete a couple of times. And it creates this kind of cool, almost like a graphic fade, if you will, by getting rid of those various elements there. So let's kind of leave that element there. It looks pretty good. Just get rid of these. Don't really need those. So that's looking pretty cool. It's already come a long way from just a standard photo. It still looks like the photo does. Now let's say I wanted to colorize this in a rather interesting way. Number of different features in Illustrator to handle color. So if I go to the window menu, I'm going to go over here and open up my Cooler panel. Now, Cooler is also included in the Creative Cloud and allows you to manage various different sets of colors that you actually manage and can get from online through the Cooler website, through the Creative Cloud. So I notice I got a number of different sets here. But if I wanted to go and get more, for instance, I'm just going to go ahead and just click on the Launch Cooler website button down here, the middle one in the bottom. And then right up here, it's going to open up the panel. Now it's allowing me to edit these features right here. But if I wanted to go into Explore, and let's do a search for, let's say, tropical, and it's going to go ahead and return a number of different sets of colors that were created by other users. And you can actually upload this. It's really just a community of colors. When you search a certain theme, it'll return a bunch of different sets here. So let's say I like, let's go over here and I'll choose, I'm going to set this one. I'm going to go ahead and click on this as a favorite. Let's go ahead and just, so I'm just going to choose a number of different sets here. I'll set that as a favorite. We'll do this one here and that one there. You can just go ahead and choose on favorites. Now, obviously you have other features you can do. You can download it to your desktop and be able to load it in the traditional way. You can even go to edit and just actually modify the set just by moving the swatches around and actually adjusting the colors. And then once you've done that, you can go over here and click save, and it will save it to your profile. If I go to my themes, you'll notice there is a bunch of different elements here. So we've got all themes in my favorites, which include all the ones I just selected and liked in my settings. So that's done with that. I'm going to go ahead and close this, or actually minimize this window for the moment. Back to Illustrator, I'm going to do a refresh in this cooler panel, and you'll notice more colors are going to start to show up. So we've got a number of different elements here that we can use now. So with that synced from the cloud, this is what's great about the cloud, is I can jump over to Cooler and do these different things and then jump back over. Let's actually go ahead and add, let's go ahead and do something else. We'll do sunset. So for that, let's say, well, I like this set here, but let's go ahead and see what all the colors look like. You can move these sliders around, of course, on the individual swatches. And that's a nice flesh tone, but let's make it a little bit darker there. There we go. So we call it, this one's called Sunset. So I'm going to go ahead and click Save. I'll jump over to My Themes. Oh, Sunset, right there. It's kind of hard, you're getting lost in the jungle of colors here, but there's Copy of Sunset right there. So back over in Illustrator, and I'm going to go and do another refresh. And there you can see there's Copy of Sunset and other things like that. Now these colors are inside of Illustrator. What I want to do is I'm going to select all of the artwork here, and then go up here in the options bar, and you'll see this little tiny wheel here, and it says to recolor the artwork. I'm going to click on that, and then I'm going to get my color panel. It's going to open up, and it's going to allow me to recolor the art in a specific way using these color sets. So let's actually move this over here. Actually move that to the side there, so we have room to see what's going on here. So let's open that up. It's going to reopen the recolor panel here. It merely just takes a second here. There we go. So all my different color sets here, let's go ahead and just, oh, forgot to do something. The reason why I'm not seeing them in my set here is because I haven't added them to my color swatch panel. So we'll cancel out of that, and we'll jump over here. Now let's open up the swatches panel, and I'm going to actually select these. Well, let's just select these top few here. Let's go ahead and select these top ones right here. Oh. So I'm just holding down the Shift key and clicking on each one of these elements here. So let's go ahead and get those few, and then I'm just going to go over to the pop-out menu here and choose Add to Swatches, and then we'll see those appear in our swatches panel right there. Now, jump over here and click on the Recolor Artwork panel, and it's going to go ahead and open that up. And this is really just an afterthought. If you just wanted to vectorize your art and leave it as is, you can certainly do that. This is just something to think about when you want to recolor it and do it more stylized. So there are those color sets we just added to the swatch panel. If I click on one, it's going to recolor the artwork based on that color. Now what you can do is, once you've selected one, go into the edit settings and actually move these color harmonies around and change the overall look of your artwork based on those settings there. So if I see this color here, if I put more of a flesh tone on them, And I can see the other colors are just kind of falling into place there. You can try different sets, of course, and get something different altogether. So it's not just being able to take your photos, convert them into vector art, but also being able to play around with the various colors using color harmonies brought in from Cooler. Again, great thing about the Creative Cloud is that it binds, just basically unifies all these elements together so that you can combine it and create something you've never seen before. And once you're done, go ahead and click OK, and there we have our new artwork based on our photo we brought in from Photoshop. Really cool way of using Image Trace and Cooler to apply really interesting color effects to vectorized photos. Now in this video, we're going to talk about masking inside Illustrator. Now, like Photoshop, there are two different ways to go about masking an image or a graphic. Now, one way is the transparency method, which is the same as a regular layer mask inside Photoshop. And then another method is using a clipping mask, which is like using a vector mask. It's using an actual vector shape. Now, work a little bit differently inside of a vector program. So let's take a look first at the transparency masking. Here I have these 4 different elements. Got my spade, hearts, diamonds, clubs, and we're ready to play cards. But I want to create a rather interesting graphic element here that's kind of faded into each one. So let's zoom in here a little bit, and I'm going to first select the spade here. Let's actually move these out of the way. And what I want to do is go ahead and do the window menu and open up the transparency panel. Let's go, there it is right there. Now, before I apply anything, I have to create an image or create a graphic that's going to be the mask or transparency mask itself. So let's go over here into the shape tools and grab the rectangular shape tool. I'm just going to draw a box over my object there. And let's go ahead and apply a gradient. I'm just going to do a simple black and white gradient here like that. And then go ahead and select both elements. I'm just going to drag and select because we know that other graphic is behind that shape. So go ahead and drag and select both of them. And in the transparency panel, just click on the little button here where it says Make Mask. Now it creates a fade. You'll see we've got 2 thumbnail elements here. Just like in Photoshop, you have the regular layer, the regular object, and then the mask itself. And if you click on this link here, you can actually unlink those 2 elements. So if I grab it and highlight on the shape, if I move it around, you'll notice the transparency changes based on the position of that graphic. If I go and grab my gradient tool, I can actually redraw the gradient in different directions to get a different fade altogether. There we go. Let's get something like that. So it looks like it's getting lighter. It's merely fading that graphic element there. And this is a really good way of being able to apply masking to individual objects, even though they're all on the same layer here inside Illustrator. So, or they can be on the same layer rather. So notice, just like in Photoshop, wherever whatever box is highlighted is whatever mode you're in. So right now we're in mask mode because the orange line is around the mask itself. But if I reselect the layer, then it allows me to move the layer itself. So remember, these elements are unlinked. So if I move it too far out of the way, it's going to go with it. So let's actually relink those back together now. And let's bring the other graphic element over. And notice when I position it in front, you can see that spade just a little bit behind there. It's actually behind it. So if we were to bring it to the front, we would see it would be blocking that out. But I actually want it to be behind there, so we'll send it to the back, and we can see that ghosting of that element a little bit better. So let's add another block around this heart shape. So I'm just going to draw a box there. We'll probably go ahead and retain that same gradient, which makes it easier for us. All I have to do is reselect both objects, click Make Mask, and there is my fade. And let's bring in the next element here. And again, I want to put that behind, so I'm going to go to Arrange, Send to Back, so I can see the ghosting of that shape there. Let's put it there. Once again, I'm going to draw a box. It's going to have the same gradient fill inside of it. We'll select both elements, Make Mask. So this is when I want to adjust the transparency of an object. Now, let's add this last element here. Once again with the shape, and it can be any shape. I'm just using a simple rectangle, but you can use any shape, any color fill that you're going to mask, but the mask itself, of course, needs to be black and white because it uses the same technology like a layer mask in Photoshop. Black will hide everything, gray will have some transparency, and white will reveal it all together. So again, we'll select both these elements, click Make Mask. So now we've got a nice fade going on between all these objects. But now what I want to do is kind of create a cropped version of this. I don't want to see the entire graphic element. So for that, I'm going to use a clipping mask. So I'm just going to grab that shape tool once again and draw a box, roughly keeping inside that area where only the elements I want to see. So I'm going to reset the fill to white and no stroke color there. There we go. So position that box in front. I'm going to drag and select everything in the image now, and then go into the object menu and go to clipping mask and choose make. And whatever the shape is on top, it's going to mask it inside there. Now you can see it's using that shape to mask only the elements that are inside of that shape. So you can only see what's inside the shape there. So two different ways of going about masking. You have the transparency method, which gives us the transparency in each individual object here. We've gone ahead and select each one, and we can go over there and adjust the mask per object. And then we used a master shape to create a clipping mask, so it clipped it just inside the viewable area of that rectangular. So remember the two methods. You've got transparency method and clipping mask method, both for very different reasons. If you want to get transparency, you want to see through an object or subtly see through an object, use the transparency mask. If you just want to clip an object, so you basically cropping it to view it in a certain way, then you would of course want to use a clipping mask. Now another really great feature, it's one of my favorite features in Illustrator here, is the blend tool. And while it sounds very simple enough, it's got a lot of really cool things happening in what it does. And you'll find that certain effects are rather easier using the blend tool than doing it other ways. So just to give you an idea of how it works, I'm going to go ahead and create a couple of shapes here. So I'm going to start with a rectangle. Let's just do a regular square here. I'm going to give it a color fill. Let's open up the swatches panel here. And let's go ahead and give it like a green color fill, not a stroke, but rather a fill. So I have no stroke color and a green color fill there. And I'm going to create a second object. Let's go ahead and do this ellipse shape here and do like a blue fill. So I have two objects. Now what I want to do is create a transition between these two. So I want this to kind of morph into this shape, and the blend tool is going to allow me to do that. Now it does it in a number of different ways. Now the tool itself is located here in the toolbar, right down here. It says blend tool. If I go ahead and select that. Now, one way you can blend an object is to, of course, use the keyboard shortcut. And for that, you don't even have to have the tool selected. I'm just going to press Option Command B, which would be Alt Control B on Windows. And there you can see it creates this transition between the two. Right now, it's blending the colors from one shape to another, as well as the shape. So it's going from this square to a circle, but also it's transitioning the colors as well. Now, of course, another method of doing that is when you're using the blend tool itself to click on a point on one object and then click on a point on the other object, and it creates the blend just the same. Now, once a blend is made, you can go in here in the toolbar and double click on the tool itself and open up the blend options. And this helps you determine further how these two objects blend together. So, and it doesn't have to be just two objects. I can have a third object here too. You can actually blend 3 or 4 or 5, it really doesn't matter. But here in the spacing, you can set it to have smooth color, a smooth color transition as we're seeing now. You can have it set to specified steps. So if I only wanted maybe 6 transitions between these two, and I turn on preview, there you can see now it's created fewer, and the blend is much more spread apart. And you also have specified distance. So if I wanted to maybe only say have them 50 points apart, there you can see the transition gets a little bit more, a little bit less. So the higher I increase the distance, the fewer transitions there are going to be. So if I do this at 150, you'll notice there's even fewer. So let's do 100, and there we have even fewer there, or a little bit more there. And then, of course, the orientation is how it aligns to the path. You know, this will align to the page, keeping it vertical or horizontal, and this will align it to the path if you need it to do that. So with the blend options set, you can go ahead and click OK. Now, there's a number of different things you can do once the blend is assigned. Well, one thing is, it is a path. We've got a key object on the end, each end of the path here, and then the path in between them that connects them. You can modify that path just like any other path. If I go in here and grab the pen tool, for instance, and move and add a control point in the middle, and then I go and get my direct selection tool and grab that control point and move it down, you can bend the path and the transition or the blend will follow along that path just the same. You can even go over here and grab the convert anchor point tool and put a curve on it. And now you can see it wraps around there. And I can also go back in there and change that alignment so it's aligned to the orientation of the object or the page again, like that. So toggling that between that and that gives you that different look there. So a lot of really cool things you can do is blend the objects, again, through the color or through the number of steps you have, and then go ahead and modify that path. You can even modify the shapes at each end. If I wanted to grab this end and modify that shape, that transition or that adjustment will adjust down the path all the way to the other shape. And if I make a change here, you can see it carries through the other objects there. So you can almost get an idea of the fun that can be had with the blend tool and blending different objects and different things like that to get very interesting abstract effects and such. Another method I really like the blend tool for is if I go over here and just make a path, let's grab my pencil tool and just draw a path here, like a curved path there. And then I just make a duplicate. I'm going to hold down the Option key on Mac, Alt on Windows, and just click on it. You see the double arrow. I'm going to drag down. Oh, can't see it because I don't have any kind of fill on it. I'm actually have set it with a black stroke and a white, or a no fill right now. And let's just drag that duplicate down. So I have two paths. I'm going to set one color and then the other a different color. So let's actually set this one to this kind of pink color here. Oh, I don't need that many duplicates. And then this one down here, I'm going to set to this kind of blue color. Now, here's what's really cool. When you're creating a transition, you want it to follow along a path. It's really kind of impossible to do that using the traditional gradient tool. However, if I select both of these paths, essentially they're parallel to each other, even though they're curved. They're both different colors. If I go ahead and assign a blend to this, you'll notice it blends evenly all the way along the curve. So this is one way to get another customized gradient on an object and allow it to follow the curve is using this blend tool. But you can also, as I said before, use that direct selection tool and grab different points and modify this shape. And notice the blend still maintains itself even though you're changing the overall look of it. The blend is still going to be there no matter what you do. So that's pretty cool. Also, if I go back in there and set specified steps, and I only do, let's say, 10, then I get fewer transitions. I actually get this kind of cool band of lines here. But, and this is something you've probably seen in different graphic elements and such like that, is if I, actually I'm going to make that to like 7. So I want to have a little bit more gap between them there. There we go. So click OK. Now, if I go and grab that direct selection tool and bend it past the other line, I'm going to get this rather cool twisting shape here. And this is all possible because of that blend tool. So graphic elements that would be seemingly complex aren't so much when you see how easy you can generate them just by creating a blend between two strokes or two shapes and then modifying the path between them, having them overlap and do all these different things via the blend tool to create really interesting graphics, even seemingly complex graphics, in a very simple way using the blend tool. Now in this video, I just want to real quickly run through bringing a layered document from Photoshop into Illustrator and maintaining all those layers, and then vice versa. We want to bring a layered Illustrator file into Photoshop and again maintain all those layers. So let's start by going from Photoshop to Illustrator. Now I'm going to go ahead and open up a document I've got here and something I actually created in Photoshop. And you'll see it's comprised of just a few layers. We've got the text layer on the 3D text on one layer, which is already rasterized, of course. And the cracks on the ground on one layer, another kind of faded element in the background, and then the background color itself. So a total of 4 layers in this Photoshop file. So this I want to bring over to Illustrator. So I'm just going to do that by opening it directly in Illustrator. So let's go into, bring up Illustrator, go to File, Open. Go into my folder, there it is, go and click Open. I'm going to be met with this panel, Photoshop Import Options. I can go ahead and show preview if I want to go ahead and see it. I know what it looks like, so I don't necessarily need it, but it's nice to know it's there. And just down here in the options, we have convert layers to objects, make text editable where possible. Well, I don't have any text layers in this particular file, but if I did, then this is the option I would want to make sure I have checked on. In fact, I always just go ahead and leave convert layers to objects, because if I know I'm bringing a layer document over, then I know I'm going to be bringing it in. I want it to be separate elements, so I'm going to just leave it on this option here. You can also choose to flatten layers to a single image and import hidden layers as well. So if any layers are turned off in your original Photoshop file, you can go ahead and tell it to go ahead and bring those over as well. So with all that in place, go ahead and click OK. It's going to open up my file here inside Illustrator. Well, it kind of looks like Photoshop, doesn't it? But if you open up the Layers panel, under the window menu, open up Layers, which is right here. There you can see the individual layers, which I can control individually. I can turn off the background color layer, that highlighted layer, the cracks on the ground, and of course the text itself. So if I decided perhaps I was working in Illustrator, I wanted to apply a different color background, then I'll just create a new layer, create a new shape, and give it a new color fill. Let's perhaps do a blue color fill or something like that. There we go. And there we have our element in there. I didn't have to go back into Photoshop and make any changes and re-import it back in. I was able to manage the layers entirely right here inside of Illustrator. Another great feature there. Now, let's take a look at going from Illustrator to Photoshop. So I have another graphic here, and this is actually an Illustrator file. It's an illustration of this golf bag and the sky and everything like that. And if you look in the Layers panel here in Illustrator, there are all the layers that make up this entire graphic. So I want to be able to take this over to Photoshop. So let's do this. I'm going to go over to File, Export, and I'm just going to send it to the desktop. And under the format, I'm going to change this to Photoshop PSD. So I want it to save as a PSD file to the desktop. I'm going to go ahead and click Export. And in the export options, I can go ahead and choose my color space. I'm going to go ahead and leave it at RGB. Resolution, I can choose screen mode, medium or high, or even input my own custom resolution right here. I'm going to go ahead and leave it at medium for the sake of space and time. Space and time, right. And right down here in the options, I can choose it to write layers and with maximum editability, meaning if there's any text objects or anything like that, I want them to be able to be editable. But in this case, there aren't anything like that. I can also choose the anti-aliasing method I want to use and any ICC profiles I might want to embed. With that all set, I'm going to click OK. It's going to go ahead and write this as a PSD file. Go ahead and go back in here. There it is on my desktop. Let's take it and open it up inside of Photoshop, and there you have it. All the layers kept separate and intact. And even layers that had multiple elements, they are now in layer groups. So I just twirl these folders down and I can see which individual elements are on there and go ahead and modify them from there. Now, of course, it has rasterized the art. It is no longer vector art. It has rasterized it by bringing it into Photoshop. But we have all the separate layers and we can edit it all we need to right here without having to go back to Illustrator. So there's just two quick methods. If you have a layered document, you want to bring it over into Photoshop, it's really quite simple. Just go ahead and save it as a PSD file, open it directly in Illustrator, and you will have those options. Remember, when you want to bring that Illustrator file over to Photoshop and maintain the layers, you need to export it and make sure you apply the necessary Photoshop features to make sure that it opens up in Photoshop the way you want it to. Now, I just want to talk about a few things on using Illustrator with the Creative Cloud. Now, there's a number of different things you can do to sync up your settings and even save files to the Creative Cloud and access them pretty much from anywhere. Now, when you download the Creative Cloud application, not the Adobe apps themselves, but the Creative Cloud app, which is running right up here in my toolbar, if I click on the little Creative Cloud icon, I can access things like my home window, my apps. This is all the apps I have installed right now. You can see I have Illustrator right there, Illustrator CC, and it is currently up to date. And I can access things like my folders and files that I've got created, and fonts, of course, using Typekit, which is a course I have also on using Typekit with your Creative Cloud. And of course, Behance, where you can actually upload your work and share it with other users who are also using Behance as well. But once you have installed the Creative Cloud files, you'll notice in here in my document, I've got a folder for Creative Cloud, and these are all linked to my Creative Cloud account, which is somewhere floating around in the cloud. So I often do a lot of work, obviously do a lot of work here at the office, but I also do work at home. But I want to sync my work, and being at home and thinking, oh, I left my file on my home computer, I no longer have that problem because I can save it to the cloud anytime I want. So back inside Illustrator, let's just have a look. Now, the first thing is you want to make sure that you're connected to the cloud inside the app. So if I go into the Illustrator menu here and go to, you can see where it's my my settings here, and I can sync settings now if I wanted to. If I go over to the sync settings in the preferences menu here, you'll notice I have all the different things I can sync up to my Creative Cloud from Illustrator. I can sync the preferences, presets, swatches, brushes, anything, any of these features, when they're checked on, will go ahead and sync to the cloud. That way, when you launch the application somewhere else, say if I'm at home on my home machine and I launch the application, I'm not going to miss a beat. All my settings, all my preferences, and even all my files are going to be there. So anytime I want to just manually go ahead and sync, I'll just go ahead and click Sync Settings Now. It's going to go ahead and make sure and it tells me when my last sync was. Now, you can also do that from within the document panel here at the very bottom left corner. You'll notice there's a couple of buttons here. You can actually share it on Behance as from right here in the panel, and also the button next to it is to go ahead and sync your settings. So there's tells me what my last sync was. I can go ahead and choose to sync the settings now if I want. But what I want to do is actually say I've got this Illustrator art. It's the end of the day. I want to go home and I want to go ahead and save this to the cloud so I can access it from home later on. So I'll just go to File and we'll go to Save As. And I'm going to go ahead and locate my Creative Cloud files. There it is. I have a folder already for Illustrator art. I'm going to go ahead and save that. And it's already in there. So if, just to be sure, I can go in there, jump into my Creative Cloud application, go to my files, and then go ahead to creativecloud.com. It's going to open up the page where my folders are. These are the same exact folders that I have on my system. They're synced together, and that's what the little green check marks mean, that they are all synced and up to date. They correspond with the original folders here on the website. So if I see that Illustrator art file, if I go ahead and double click that, I can see that there is the art I just uploaded, and now I can access it pretty much anywhere I'm at. And I can actually log in to my Creative Cloud, download it, work on it, do whatever I need to do, and never miss a beat there. So it's really, really cool to be able to sync all these things and basically not lose your experience from one machine to the other by use of the Creative Cloud. A lot of really great things initially here in the Creative Cloud, and it can only get better from here because there's a lot more cool things that are going to be coming out pretty soon. As well as, not to mention earlier in this course, I talked about Cooler, which is that application that allows you to manage colors. And again, you can access the Cooler app all in the Creative Cloud by launching that application and going in here. We're still in the Creative Cloud here. It's under my same account. There it is right there. And I can go in here and do all kinds of things, accessing and modifying all my preferences and such via a web browser or from right here on my desktop and keep everything synced up together. So not only is that artwork living in the cloud, it's also living on my computer system. So if I'm, for whatever reason, not attached to the internet, I can still go in that Creative Cloud folder, and there's that artwork right there. If I want to drag it out, put it on my desktop, boom, it's there. So there's this misconception that people might think, oh, if I put it in the cloud, I can't, it's there, and something happens, I can't get to it. It's still in your desktop, but it's also on the cloud, and you can access it anywhere. And this is, of course, throughout every Adobe application. You can sync up settings and files and all that sort of thing, all in one central location on the Creative Cloud.